Hey readers, I've had so much fun transitioning from our expository nonfiction text to our narrative nonfiction text. And I've been learning about how authors of narrative nonfiction have this beautiful way of writing where they can kind of tell me a story and also embed some facts for me to learn about. And I was just reminded of these charts that I have that kind of rev my mind up the right way for the day's lesson. So, for the past couple of days, we've really practiced reading a narrative nonfiction as a story where we have characters and we can analyze the character, and they usually have some obstacles or some problems to overcome, and then they could hopefully solve their problem. And we also learned about how usually when we have narrative nonfiction, we know what the end is going to be, and so that kind of helps us figure out, okay, does this little breadcrumb that the author has left me, is that important? Is it something I need to remember? And how does it factor into the end that I already know is going to happen? But today I want you to rev up your mind a little bit differently. Because remember, narrative nonfiction is not just a narrative, but it is also nonfiction. So today we're going to take a look at the facts that we can find in our narrative nonfiction text. And what I really want us to focus on is there are parts of a narrative nonfiction text where the facts tell you not just about the person or maybe the event that you're reading about, but they can tell you about what the world was like when that person was living, or what was going on across our planet Earth when that event happened. And it can give you kind of a snapshot of what life was like during the time of whatever your narrative nonfiction subject is. So today we're going to practice some of that. We're going to practice looking at a narrative nonfiction and saying, okay, right. That looks really mostly about the character. It sounds like a story, so that's very narrative-like. But this right here, this part of our text, that's giving me so many facts about what was happening at that point in our history. So to our reading teacher we go. She's going to give us some more information on this.
When we turn to read in a way that we want to learn information, we focus on setting or on events in history that are at the time period of our person. Like, what was life like in that time period? Or we could read to learn information about the topic our person's really famous for, like chemistry or violins. Let's try it with a book called The Story of Ruby Bridges. Now, just so you know, in case you're not familiar, Ruby is a little girl who moved with her family from Mississippi to New Orleans in search of a better life. And in 1960, a judge ordered Ruby to attend an all-white school, and Ruby had to face angry crowds of people who refused to send their children to school with her. As I read a little snippet of text to you, I want you to think to yourself, ask yourself, what information am I learning here? What are the main ideas and key details? What boxes and bullets could I make out of what I'm learning? Remember the tip I gave you a little while ago. You could think about the setting, the time period. Ready? Ears open. Here we go. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a janitor. Her mother took care of the children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing floors in a bank. At that time, black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. The black children were not able to receive the same education as the white children. It wasn't fair, and it was against the nation's law. In 1960, a judge ordered 4 black girls to go to 2 white elementary schools. 3 of the girls went to McDonough 19. 6-year-old Ruby Bridges was sent to first grade, in the William France Elementary School. Okay, readers, think to yourself, what information did you just learn?
Well, let's test it out before she gives us the answer. Let me tell you what I was thinking as she was reading. This first paragraph right here of the excerpt, it's talking about her family, her father's job, what her mother was doing. It uses a phrase like after they were tucked in bed. That feels very storyteller-like to me. I'm not getting a ton of information about what life was like in 1957 right there. I'm just learning about Ruby's family. That is our narrative part. Right here, at that time, this is where I start to find out a lot of information about exactly what was happening in 1957. Let's see if our teacher agrees with us.
What main ideas, key details? Think. The box of my boxes and bullets. There were separate schools for black and white kids in New Orleans back in 1957.
Let's see if that's a fact that was on here. Yep, black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. Look at where it is. Remember, this was our narrative part. When we got down here, we started to learn facts about what life was like during that time.
First detail. Black children were denied the same education as white children. Another detail. This was illegal, and it still is. In 1960, a judge ordered 4 girls of color to go to white elementary schools.
Let's see if her boxes and bullets are found in the article. The bottom part of the article where we had suspected was where more of the information was. We saw her box was black and white children went to separate schools, and then her first detail was that black children were denied services. Yep. Second was that it was illegal against the nation's law. Yep. And her third fact was that in 1960, the judge had ordered some change with that. So, looks like we can have storytelling and information in the same text. Now, I wanted to just, for a couple of moments, quickly show you how this could work in a text that we're familiar with, our Abe Lincoln text, right? So I went through and took a couple of pages that I thought were a nice mix of narrative and informative information. So some narrative nonfiction and also some expository nonfiction that tells me about the time that Abraham Lincoln lived in. So let's start with this one. I knew that being tall is not enough to make your way in this world. I know nothing about what's going on in Abraham Lincoln's time right now. That is all about Abe. That is narrative. I needed words for that. When I studied to become a lawyer, I practiced my cases out loud as I walked, learning how to use words like a leading rein on a colt to take people where I wanted. But when I ran for the legislature, I saw it would take a deal of tugging to persuade people that slavery was wrong. Look at all this narrative, 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 narrative. It's telling me what Abraham Lincoln did, how he walked and talked. That's not giving me information about that time period. But you know what is giving me information? Where he says it would take a deal of tugging to persuade people that slavery was wrong. Right here, I find out that people were in huge disagreements about whether slavery was right or wrong. I find out that Abraham Lincoln was going to do a ton of work to try to get people to stop disagreeing about that. Let's try another one. Then I found Mary, who agreed to be my wife. She was bright and brave, like a flag cracking in the wind, all color, rustle, and shine. When I ran for the Senate, she told me, "You will win, and someday you will be president." How I laughed at that! But later, others thought the same, and I was nominated to run for the highest office. I talked and debated to show people that we must be one nation, not part slave, not part free. Look at all this narrative information about Lincoln and Mary. That's lovely information about his life. What I'm looking for is factual information about what was going on during that time. Sounds to me like people who were wanting to be slave owners and people who were wanting slaves to be free were really having disagreements and wanted to split the nation. think about the clues that I can get about what other people besides just Abraham Lincoln was thinking during this time by reading this narrative nonfiction as an information seeker, looking for little clues that tell me about that time in our history. I'm going to give you a chance to try this on It's Learning. Good luck!